Just
an applications engineer at Solido. Our names changed quite a bit over the years. We got purchased by Mentor Graphics, who then got purchased by Siemens, the global global tech and just in general everything conglomerate, really. I know the title of applications engineer is a little bit fuzzy. I know a lot of people who kind of sign into or kind of go in for software development. That's kind of what is a lot of the time touted as, one of the main jobs available in tech. And I honestly thought that for the longest time, and I couldn't realize how wrong I was. That's why I kind of have my Who Am I to showcase just kind of where I wound up going through. So I really started out as I wanted to just do software, so I joined the computer engineering technology program at what was back then SciAst. Turns out that schooling is not much catered towards software development so much as it is, developing computer hardware. So not necessarily building computers, but building the parts that go into a computer, all the tiny little microchips and things like that. So I ended up switching over and moving to computer systems technology at what is now Sask Polytech. That is significantly more software development focused, but a little bit of IT as well. So you kind of learn about networking, technology like that, building computers as well. It's, honestly, a lot of the times it's kind of like building Lego, but you can still make a lot of mistakes, and it's nice to have some schooling on that. When I graduated from that, I did start working at SED Systems in Saskatoon. They do a lot of work with satellite technology, so my primarily employment was Sirius XM satellite radio, and I worked on what was referred to as DevOps, which is essentially very, very hyper-specialized IT for developers. Of course, there's not necessarily, I wasn't around replacing computers and fixing bad internet. I was actually more or less responsible for implementing, kind of integrating in new software and tools for our very talented set of developers. So that would be, making sure that these pieces of software are not just working, but that they're good. So I needed to have the insight of a developer as well as the skill set of an IT person. But that wasn't quite for me. At the point, I really wanted to join software development, not helping software developers. So I moved over to Solido, and I started out in software QA, which is, debugging, testing, making sure that everything works as well as it can before you get something sent out to the customers. This is kind of important because I was kind of told by the management team that my personality is not suited for somebody stuck behind a desk. Which, that's kind of all I've been doing over the course of this past little bit, working from home. But they wanted me to move into being an applications engineer. I started out as a junior applications engineer, which is very largely customer facing, but it's for sometimes it could be something like helping a developer use it or a designer using the tool, such that they may be running into a bug. But sometimes it's as critical as you're working with some of the largest tech companies in the world, trying to make sure that your software can enable them to do as much as they possibly can, because ultimately you can save them millions or tens of millions of dollars and make yourself millions or tens of millions of dollars for the company in the process. I started out as a junior applications engineer, and as of yesterday, I moved into being an intermediate applications engineer. Some of the work that's come in, it's kind of come up to be quite intense, and thankfully our company does recognize that. And I did also want to explain what the company is, because I know at a certain technical level, there's a lot of confusion when people are going into software development. They want to specialize in a specific software language, but in reality, it's a little bit nebulous when you consider the fact that, people are jumping around in these technologies all the time. And we've been around since, 2005. And our real goal is to assist designers, and designers in this term isn't meaning, fashion or anything like that. It's computer chips. So this would mean specifically the processor or the brain of your cell phone. I actually would have, if you have an Android phone, I at some point have been responsible for helping getting that to market. And now same with iPhones. And our real goal is to make sure that these when they're developing these phones, there's billions and billions of tiny little computer components that go into these. And they need to make sure that none of those fail. And they can utilize our tools such that they don't have to manufacture these billions of things only to find out that almost all of them fail. That can be a extremely costly process, and that's where our tool comes in. They can simulate kind of a virtual environment of having these chips made and seeing exactly how they work. These slides are a little bit out of date in that I did say we're growing to 100 staff. We're actually looking to grow significantly higher. So if when people go through university, or maybe you have the skill set right outside of high school to maybe apply for these, we're growing, and we actually have a ton of positions available for developers or even AEs as well. To kind of jump in a little bit into specifically applications engineers. I know that there's kind of a bit of a, like I said, it's a very weird name for what is essentially a very broad description of my position. And that kind of comes down to, quality in the field. You want to make sure that when your developer or when your customers are working on the tool, they have somebody they can come to as their guy or girl for the, these very hyper niche critical questions and potential use cases for the software that your development team has been hard at work developing. I like to consider it as technical depth with charisma, because not only do you need to be really well versed in technology, specifically the technology you're working with, you also need to have the kind of personality that can get you in front of people who've probably been working in this industry 20, 30 years longer than you, or probably in my case, sometimes longer than I've been born. And you kind of have to talk to them as if you're the expert in this scenario. So it's a little bit overwhelming at first. And I know public speaking is not exactly everyone's forte right now, but for the few of people that do excel in this kind of public speaking field, this is kind of where the job, these kind of jobs are available. So you're kind of acquiring a lot of in-depth knowledge from a lot of companies about these kind of analog designs, digital designs. I don't know if there's really any electrical classes available in the schools that this is presenting to. But these would be kind of, companies like, for example, Samsung or Sony or things like that. You'll be talking to them over, day in and day out about these kind of topics, such that you end up actually being more of an expert than some of the people that have been around longer than you've been alive in the field. Because they only have 20 years of the same experience at the same company, whereas you have 4 or 5 years of worth of experience at 4 or 5 different companies. So you kind of have a bit more broad of knowledge. But really, I mean, at the end of the day, the real goal here is that people want to understand how to use this tool. They want to find specific ways that this tool can be used for their use case, and ultimately, our goal is to make sure that they use it enough that it drives usage of our tool, therefore selling, they need to buy more of it, because it's kind of like every other piece of software. It's available on a license, and the more people that use it, the more you have to pay, kind of like buying more user accounts for the Netflix that you share for 7 or 8 different people. And this sometimes can be as simple as just training a person on day-to-day use, or working with people who consume more of your software than anybody else in the entire industry that you sell to, which is the call that I'm having to drop off at in 20 minutes. And sometimes this even involves traveling to these sites. Oftentimes people are much more open to discussing something after they've met you in person. So you don't just sound like a talking head. You're actually a person that they can talk to face to face. It's definitely a lot more nerve-wracking to do that, but obviously right now none of us are doing that. And sometimes this does almost come with a little bit of a managerial and expectation setting standpoint as well. You kind of, maybe someone will come to you with a very technically challenging question that you don't have an answer to because your tool doesn't support it. Your software does not work in that way, but it can, and you can see a perfect way that can cause, that can actually cause you to make more money. And that's when you kind of work with the development team to make sure that expectations are set, requirements are met, such that you can drop this into their flow, their work, and it will work perfectly fine. And you have the potential to make hundreds of thousands of dollars by just making sure that things are explained correctly. But sometimes it could be as simple as needing a little bit of understanding of development. That's kind of where I think some of my skill set really shined here, is that not only do I have, I like to think I have a little bit of charisma when it's talking to people that I don't know, but I also have a little bit of experience with development. So there's times where you have to develop sometimes very complex scripts. This looks a lot more complex than it is, but it is actually essentially just, it runs a bunch of things a lot of times. And of course, running many things means they need to buy more. And sometimes you actually have these specific workflows that you can run up. So instead of them having to open your tool, click a lot of buttons, and click them hundreds of thousands of times, they can run one single thing, and it runs all of that in a single click. That's ultimately where where money can be made, because more things being ran in parallel means more money coming into the company. And sometimes these scripts can even be something that can turn into products that we sell. But of course, this is like I keep coming back to, these are relatively niche kind of positions that are available. But I like to think that the tech center in Saskatchewan in particular doesn't, it's very catered towards software development being one of the primary jobs that's available. Ultimately, that isn't often the case. As I showed in my work experience, I have had everything but software developer under my belt at this point. Even prior to all of that, I worked in IT, and it was not for me. It's a little bit, in this case, the reason that this is so, I find this job so rewarding and fun, is that these aren't easy problems to solve. You're not unplugging the computer and turning it back on. You're working with somebody who knows that you're really good at what you do, and they're coming to you asking for an expert opinion on how they can get the next iPhone to market, because they're running into a lot of problems where they don't have the money or the time or the availability to just be able to pump out these billions and billions of computer chips and get them out to market. And then they come to you, and you at some point kind of feel, I mean, it's a very small part, but ultimately at the end of the day, without our software, sometimes we may not necessarily have the next iPhone or the next Galaxy S10. But of course, not all of that kind of falls flat. Like I can't sell a product if I don't have a product to sell. And that's kind of where software development comes into play. I like to think that, software development is definitely something that a lot of people can get into. Not necessarily, you don't have to wait until you finish a university degree, or in my case, a SAS Polytech diploma, to start to become an expert in this field and really shine through. Of course, those certainly do help, but these are things that you can pick up and start working on right now. If you have, I mean, everybody who's watching this, I would assume, has some form of computer, a keyboard, and a mouse. And I mean, sometimes you don't even need to do that. And almost everybody can think of one problem in their life that they think that they can solve with technology. Learning those kind of things really helps out with, showcasing that more than just what a piece of paper on the wall will tell you. And that's actually what a lot of our interview process handles is of course, we can see that you have this degree and diploma that clearly means that you've gone through some formal education, but what about the stuff that you do on your spare time? What about the informal education? And that's why I actually do have some of the areas of expertise that we find a lot of our software developers needing that sometimes gets overlooked. Writing code is fine and all, but sometimes you need to be a little bit more in depth than that. Obviously machine learning is at its core, it's just programming. But then there's things like how you can program something, but can you program it so it works well or it works fast? And that's where the kind of algorithm sides of things, or distributed computing, so perhaps running the same thing split across 50 different computers such that it runs 50 times faster. And one thing that everybody seems to forget is usability. I'm sure we've all downloaded an application off of the App Store where you're trying to do something and you have to go through 4 or 5 or 6 extra taps of your screen to get to where you need to be. When we're talking about people who they use this tool on a day-to-day basis for their job, they don't want to have to do any of that. They want to just click and go, and sometimes they don't have the time to do anything other than click and go. So learning these kind of things, quite frankly, during my education, I didn't learn much about user experience or usability at all. And I feel like it was rather important to learn after the fact, such that now I can talk to designers in a very casual sense and let people know when, perhaps something didn't end up coming to market because it didn't work well enough for what I would have thought. And I know that I'm kind of speaking a lot about software development in general, but I do kind of want to highlight a little bit about working at the Mentor/Siemens/Solido office here as well. Obviously, none of us are really working in the office right now. There's a very small select few of us, but it really is a great entry point if you're just looking for experience for working in semiconductors. You'd be involved in production workflows for companies like Apple, like I said, Samsung or Nvidia. And if you're an AE, not only are you going to be involved in getting this to market, you're going to have industry contacts with these people. I've added people that I work with at Nvidia on LinkedIn, and of course I can talk to them in a casual sense as well. But just working within Mentor alone, you're really getting countless different career paths. Obviously, when I started at Solido, I had no idea what an applications engineer was, only that they were the loudest group in the entire office. And Solido kind of listened to the octave level of my voice, I suppose. And just they can kind of figure out where do we think you'll be the happiest? Where do we think that you'll get furthest in your career, whilst of course still respecting your opinion. I had the option to stay as QA, and I'm quite frankly, I'm glad I had the opportunity to move here. And of course it's extremely rewarding, because at the end of the day, you're part of developing something that at the end of the day just gives the entire world a new set of technology that at some point wouldn't be available. If we take, for example, the Samsung phones that did explode because of their batteries. They were having problems where they were generating too much heat and the battery would actually explode. That is the problem that if they had purchased our tool at the time could have been solved. They could see by running these tests, as opposed to printing billions and billions of the same tiny device, they could have ran our tool and find that there's a certain scenario in which those phones generate far too much heat and things don't work properly. And we also have just some silly office antics as well. I know some places try to push us a little bit too much, but on Fridays, we end up having everybody kind of stops work a little bit early, and we get a chance to just socialize and hang out. That's even right now, being away from the office. We're able to all just kind of hop on a video chat and have a good time. There's also oftentimes a lot of free candy available. And if you're an AE, no matter if you're a junior AE or an intermediate, you get your own office, and they look really nice because they are in, you get like nice window views. You can see everybody is around. And of course, we do have just in general, a fantastic office and a fantastic group of people as well. I know that there's really not too many people on the call right now, but I do definitely think I do have a little bit of time to answer some questions in case I left things a little bit confusing for applications engineering, software development, anything like that. Does anybody have anything? Oh, I got a notification my internet is unstable.
Maybe stop your screen share.
Okay.
Check if there's anybody. So basically, you are pre-testing a lot of efficiencies for components that go into hardware and software, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Instead of people making losing a lot of money by manufacturing all of this, we're able to prove out whether it does or doesn't work before they start dropping millions of dollars into building something that could explode.
Are we on? Another question for you, like I noticed the team picture and stuff in normal times. uh, it's a very much a teamwork approach. It's not a lot of kids have the idea that if you work in this industry, somehow you're in a small room in the basement, or hidden away. But it's really quite the contrary, from what I.
It, Absolutely, it is completely contrary. There are certainly people who excel working in a basement, hunkering down by themselves. And sure, we'll support you if that's what you want. But ultimately, we are a team, and that's kind of what I like the most about working as an applications engineer is sometimes your decisions can make or break significant amounts of money being dealt, and it's not something that we would ever fire a person over for missing the mark on those. A lot of times we treat failures as learning opportunities. Not everybody's perfect, everybody knows that, and sometimes you just need you can take it as a learning opportunity, and you have a team available to help you see that through, whereas if you're kind of working by yourself alone, you kind of feel like you have a burden to be the best all the time, always on, and that's just not the kind of thing we want people to have to feel like that they're overworking themselves.
For any student that's going to watch this presentation, Kyler, how do you market Solido? How do we get to know who you are and, the job prospects of potentially becoming an employee? Is it word of mouth, or is it, what's your main form of marketing your company right now?
You mean specifically marketing for when we're looking for new
employees? Yeah.
New employees? Okay. Well, oftentimes we will, when we're doing big pushes for hire, almost everybody in the office submits, they add posts on Facebook, they add posts on LinkedIn. We also, I believe, post on Sask Jobs as well. But honestly, at the end, sometimes you just have to network. Sometimes it is just word of mouth as well. Even if we don't have open positions, which in my case was actually what happened. I was able to, work with my, the network of people I met over the course of college, and find where I like to work. But I do like to emphasize that, as much as you can submit your resume on, LinkedIn or Sask Jobs, if you know a person who is in the office and you've spent time networking and going to events, when we can do that, of course, that'll help immensely, because oftentimes you kind of skip through the first few stages of the interview process. You skip through getting you don't get your resume stacked onto a massive pile for HR, who may not know exactly what your skill set is. So I do recommend, if you want to get into this kind of industry, even if the perception is that it's not as social as one might think, going to those networking events, meeting the people, getting your face out there, it means a lot for these kind of positions. More so sometimes more so than formal education. But I do still think that there is a lot of value in that too, of course.
Awesome. Thank you, Kyler. That's a good answer.
Mm-hmm. I guess I'm not sure if anybody else has anything, or I guess if there's anything we want to address in case, whenever somebody has a chance to watch.
Did we talk about the wage remuneration, like the wage possibilities for people just entering, and how it scales up?
Oh yeah, we definitely can. It definitely does scale. Depending on where you are in the software industry in general, it can be wildly different. Startups, of course, sometimes they'll start you at 70,000, 80,000 a year, but you're also carrying a lot of risk that what if the business falls under? It's just kind of a real, an expectation that not all startups will succeed. But a lot of them in Saskatchewan, we do have kind of a very good amount of backing for these kind of startup things. But at Solido in particular, I believe the starting wage for developers does hover around the $60,000 mark. Sometimes a little bit lower, of course. Previous experience in the field, showcasing what you can do outside of school, does mean a lot. If you can prove that you're interested in it, of course you can negotiate. And AEs, the field, it does scale a little bit higher because, of course, we are directly correlated to money. So there is a little bit of a variable commission for us as well. Not, of course, on your own. It's an entire team. So if the entire team succeeds, the entire team gets the big paycheck every quarter or something like that. But it is kind of in and around the $65,000, $70,000 range for the kind of junior intermediate level.
Good to know for kids.
Mm-hmm. that'll help pay off student loans or whatever as fast as possible.
And then hours wise, are you working long weeks? Is it a job? Like what are the challenges that come along with your job?
Yeah. Honestly, the biggest challenge I think is for my job specifically, it can be time zones. Of course, if I'm working with people in, California, they're 2 hours behind us. So their 2 p.m. is the time I leave work at 4 p.m. So with that in mind, a lot of our developers, they really do just work 40 hours a week, and the hours are flexible. You can work 10 to 6 if you'd like. You can work 8 to 4. I know some people that go even earlier. And sometimes, maybe occasionally, you might have to stay an extra 30 minutes to just finish something up. But that's not expected that you then just work free for 30 minutes. You can just leave 30 minutes earlier the next day. AEs, it's a little bit odd because sometimes the hours, they still should always be 40 hours a week, but sometimes those 40 hours aren't 8 hours perfectly in line. For me, sometimes if I have a call that for some reason happens at 6 p.m. my time, I will just leave early, or I'll start late. So you have to be a little bit flexible, but not with the amount of time you work, just the times that you do work for my type of role. For the developers, it is much more relaxed. It's just do your work, and at the end of Fridays, pie o'clock, you can enjoy a drink with your coworkers.
Good. Sounds good. Thank you. I figured that being with that global reach, the time zones would play into the average person's work week.
Yeah, it only becomes annoying when you also consider that Saskatchewan doesn't do daylight savings time like the rest of everybody else. I honestly thought it was great until I started this job, and then I realized that now the people that I have to work with in California are 2 hours behind me instead of 1 hour. And that's honestly and we do also have people all over the globe. So it's not like you're going to be often working with people in India who are 11 and a half hours ahead of you. So if you don't take a call at midnight, they should be in bed. So we do have people in India or kind of all around the world to take those really, really difficult time zone differences.
Thanks, Kyler. I know you've got an important call coming, so I guess on behalf of all of us and all the students, thanks again for spending some time with us, enlightening us about the application engineer and software development field.
Yeah, not a problem. If anybody does happen to have any questions after watching the presentation, don't hesitate to just send them my email. I'd be happy to just talk to them one-on-one, or just field questions by email if need be.
Good. Thanks.
All right.